Second Lieutenant David Burton Price, United States Army, Vietnam. Had the great honor of interviewing David in Frankfort, Kentucky, folks. It was May 30th, 2006. And it seems like a long time ago. And David told me a great story. He served in Vietnam as a platoon leader for the 2nd of the 27th, 2nd Battalion, 27th Infantry Regiment. The Wolfhounds, no fear on earth was their motto, part of the 25th Infantry Division in Vietnam, and saw a lot of frontline combat, folks, as a platoon leader. So lost a lot of men, saw a lot of things, and suffered with PTSD like a lot of the Vietnam veterans have. And I was sad to find out we lost Dave in 2019 at the age of 77. He talked about some health things in the interview, so it might have caught up to him, but he was probably 64 when I interviewed him in Frankfort, Kentucky. Have worked in Kentucky too, folks, Owensboro, Frankfort, Louisville. First time I flew into the Cincinnati airport, I thought, I'm in Ohio. I was in northern Kentucky. Maybe you've experienced that too, but good memories of my time in Kentucky. So I interviewed a lot of veterans at that time in Frankfort, and actually had 2 showings of my films there at the convention center in Frankfort. So good memories. But David, we miss him, but I'm thankful that we can share his story. 2 Purple Hearts, folks, a Bronze Star, an Army Commendation Medal, and some other distinguished awards. Just a decorated soldier, an unsung hero, and just, you're gonna like his story. I know you will. So I want to thank Don Larson. Don, I want to salute you, sir. Thank you for working with me again. This is the 2nd time you have come forward to help sponsor a story, Don, and I so appreciate you. I want you to know that, and your support to our veterans, our country, and to continue with this work. And I hope we can keep working together, Don, and you're a blessing to this audience. So God bless you, sir. Okay, folks, let's sit back and invite the family, let's invite the kids to watch this story. David Price, 2nd Lieutenant David Price, Vietnam. 2 tours in Vietnam, by the way. The first tour was in 1966, and that's what he mainly will focus on in his interview. But let's just invite, like I said, invite the family. Let's listen to David's story. Let's honor this man. An act of remembrance is an act of honor. And I'm just so happy I can bring it to you here on the Voices of History YouTube channel, and it will then go on to the Voices of History radio channel. So hopefully some of you are tuning into that. I probably don't talk about it enough, but I'm excited about the radio station. Hopefully we can go into a 3rd year in March. So that's my hope and my prayer. It's a great supplement to this channel. A lot of people being touched, being helped through these stories, folks. That's what it's all about. Anyways, I could say a lot more, but let's get into the story, and I'll talk to you in my next broadcast. God bless you.
Really? Oh, this town is bad for that.
Okay, we're rolling. All this expense is happening right now. Okay. Dave, you're with the Army.
Yes, sir.
Vietnam Infantry?
Yes.
What was your rank at the time of Vietnam?
Which time? I was there twice.
Well, let's take the first time.
I was a 2nd lieutenant.
Okay, what year was that?
1966, June 1966.
2nd Lieutenant, were you over a platoon?
Platoon.
Infantry.
Yes.
Was this your first time in Vietnam?
Yes.
Okay, can you remember tell me what it was like the first time you landed, you got out? Was it what you heard it was going to be, or what do you remember experiencing when you first landed in Vietnam?
Well, I came in early in 66, and that was when the first replacements were coming in for the 25th Division. And I was in the Wolfhounds, 2nd 27th Infantry. And when I got there, at that time, they had no orientation, no program to get you acclimated. The heat was just almost overwhelming. And you came in and got off an airplane, and you could see all of these Vietnamese, and we'd already been told that half of them are bad guys. So you're out in the middle of nothing, no weapon. We didn't have anything with us, weren't allowed to bring anything in. And that was the atmosphere you go into, and it was almost like you're actually afraid to do anything. They put us in a little compound where they had us at Alpha Camp, I think was the name of it, and they put you in there, and you just kind of wander around there. You could go out if you wanted to, but I guarantee you, all the people who had just gotten in country were not going to go out because it was that literally scary out there.
How old were you then?
24.
Okay, so you're a second lieutenant.
Mm-hmm. I got to Vietnam on June the 7th, or June the 8th, 1966. Okay. On June the 11th, 8th, 10th, on June the 10th, I was in a combat unit as a platoon leader.
Tell me a little bit about that and your experiences in combat, and I'm particularly interested in the Huey helicopters taking troops in and out of landing zones and all that. Can you take me through a mission, basically what it involved, and then the operation itself, and then into combat?
I can give you one better than that. When I was with the 25th Division as a platoon leader, I had an occasion where I was the ready reaction force for the 25th Division. We got in a helicopter, 6 helicopters had my platoon. We got in a helicopter and lifted off at first light. We refueled hot. We didn't get off the helicopter all day. And we shut it off at night when it got dark. And our job was just to be in the air, making big circles, like they used to say, make holes in the air. You make big circles in the air. And if anything happened anywhere, they sent us to that. I had a case, yay big, with maps of everything within 300 miles of Cu Chi, where we were stationed. And they would say, okay, you're going to so-and-so, and I'd look and get the map, and they'd say, we're going to put you out on the ground here. So they'd test us out and insert us in the ground. And never once did they put me where they told me they were going to. So helicopters were the thing. Had it not been for the helicopters, I don't think we could have fought Vietnam. It would not have been possible. It was an invention that its time had come. It was really the thing to do. The bad part about it was that 99% of the time, we overtaxed the helicopter's capabilities. Almost always we were doing that, it seemed like. The Huey helicopter will hold 13 soldiers under normal conditions. It was so hot over there and the air was so thin that you were lucky if you got 8 on there. So we really didn't use them to the capability because of the conditions that they existed. And then they tried to make helicopters into gunships, and and it was effective somewhat, but it was the forerunner of the Cobra. Now the Cobra was very effective. I loved it. That was a 2-man ship.
Tell me about the crew on a Huey, if you know what it was, and again, take me into a combat mission.
Well, normally what you would do, if you had a mission you were going to go that you needed to be aired into, you'd have an LZ that you were going to land in. We'd go to the airfield and they'd warm up the helicopters an hour or so before we were supposed to get there. We'd take our troops in and we'd start loading the helicopters up with our gear. You'd take, usually when you went, you took enough food for 3 days, if you thought you were going to be there that long. If you thought you were going to be there longer than that, you hoped they would get food to you, basically is what it boiled down to. And with the helicopters, most of the time they could. But you'd go down and then they'd load you on the helicopter and then they'd test them, see if they could get them up or not. They'd start off with 10, and then when that didn't work, they'd drop one off, go back and try it again, and they'd get it to the point where at times I had 6 on the helicopter. That's all it would lift. It just wouldn't hold anymore. And the air was just absolutely thin, just oppressive. They didn't have doors on them. They had a gunner on each side with an M60 machine gun hung from a strap on the aircraft. Not the best situation in the world. But most of those guys were a little weird anyway. They call them Huey Gunners is what they called them. And most of them were crazy, I think, because they would get hit someplace and they'd tell the pilots, you had a pilot and a co-pilot. Each aircraft had a pilot and a co-pilot. But one of the things that most people don't understand about helicopters is that the ground commander in the aircraft actually commands the aircraft. As a lieutenant, I had control of 6 aircraft. I had a lieutenant one time, or had a warrant officer one time that tried to balk on me, and they took care of him real quick. Because they're there because I'm there. That's the only reason. I hate to say it, but we used to call them chauffeurs. They were there to take us to where we were going to go. That's all we were interested in.
Well, you were in charge of 6 helicopters?
Yes.
Were you on the radio talking at all? Or?
Yes. You got a headset just like the pilots do. That.
Okay, so who are you talking to? I mean, at takeoff, what are you saying?
You're talking to the pilots to start with, telling them what you want them to do. Then you're talking to your commander, whoever that is. In my case, the commander when I was flying the alert was the Division G3. He's the division, Lieutenant Colonel, division officer is what he is. And he's in charge of all the operations that go on, everything that goes out on the field. And then on occasion, you would get other people that came in, called you in about something. If you had a ground commander that was in trouble, then you'd end up talking to him. We could switch frequencies almost instantly.
Were you going out to combat assault missions or what?
Oh yeah, that's what they were. Every insertion that I was on was an assault mission. That's the only kind I never did write them for fun or.
Now, just imagine, in my mind, I'm listening to it and thinking now, take me on a mission. I mean, let's get into the helicopter, tell me who's on board, and tell me where you're going, and then tell me about landing in a landing zone.
Well, we had one LZ Bluegrass. I remember it in particular because being born and bred in Kentucky, that kind of sticks with you. But we were going into LZ Bluegrass, and we had 6 helicopters up. One of the helicopters dropped out before we could even get there. He went back, so I'm missing 6 people to start off the mission with. I have a platoon going against what was suspected to be a NVA battalion, a regular Army battalion, not the guerrillas that we normally fought down there. So you can imagine how I felt en route to going to the LZ where we were going to blast off from there and go on foot for the rest of it. But then we would fly to the site. They'd go down, and most times they would not land. They would come down within a couple of feet of the ground, and then you'd jump out the sides, and then they fly off and go back to get somebody else or to another mission, whatever their rules were after that. And then we would do whatever it was we were intending to do at that time. Most of the time we were going to go online or in a semi-line and assault something or get to a position where we could assault something. And that's what that one was, that particular day, that's what that one was. And we went into position and we're going to set up. We didn't get there until almost dark. We weren't going in to assault them really that day. We went in to do it so we'd be there the next morning. So we went in and put in an L-shaped ambush, put it up and stayed up all night long with that. And during the night, they walked by us. We had a battalion-sized unit just literally left the area and walked by us. And I was wanting to take some action with it, and they wouldn't let me. I'm talking to the division commander by this time, who was a 2-star general, when he found out what was there. And I'm going, but I can get a bunch of them right here. And he's going, nope, don't do it. We got to get them all or we can't do it. Which never did make any sense to me, but I found out in retrospect that he was playing the politics and that he was either going to make the big splash and get everything or he wasn't going to do anything. And he didn't tell me, as I found out later, he readied 2 battalions to come to us. And he was thinking he was going to be able to cut them off, but we knew that wouldn't work. Had he told me that, I'd have told him it wouldn't work, but he didn't tell me. He just told us to hold our position. And we had 28 claymores lined up in a row. Do you know what a claymore is?
Not really.
It's a hand-activated landmine.
Okay.
And it's shaped like that, full of BBs and that kind of stuff actually it's in C4. And when you blast it, it shoots everything out. And it's good for about 40 yards, something like that. But when you shoot one off, there's nothing live in front of it when you get through it. And I had 28 of those out that I could have fired. I didn't have to fire a single round of ammunition, and I could have just decimated that unit, and they wouldn't let me do it.
So you're in an area, you're going on combat missions with your troops. I mean, are you getting into ambushes, or are you sniping going on?
Sometimes you've always got the guerrillas out hunting for you, and most of the time what that is they'll pop up out of a hole, fire one round, and then they drop back down the hole, and then you spend the next 2 hours trying to find them, which you don't. But you find the holes a lot of times, and you drop a grenade down in the hole, hoping that it takes care of them.
Might sound silly, but was it exciting? I mean, your Vietnam experiences in combat, was it exciting? You know, you talk to these World War II guys, and there's the landing and then the ensuing operation, and obviously the enemy was defined in World War II. But I mean, is there a lot of adrenaline? Is it?
Always a bunch of adrenaline, but exciting is not a good word to me.
What's the word?
Because as a platoon leader, I had 21 people I'm trying to keep alive. So I didn't have time to get excited. I refused to get excited, as a matter of fact, because I knew if I got excited, they were going to. And if they got excited, somebody's going to get hurt, and there'd be nothing I could do about it.
Did you lose any of these men?
Yes. I lost 20 of them, as a matter of fact, during that first year.
How does it feel as a lieutenant? I mean, do you get close to your men, or I mean?
I'll have to tell you a story to make you understand that. I have been diagnosed as having post-traumatic stress syndrome. And one of the things I have learned from knowing what was happening to me then is I don't remember any of their names. And they tell me it's probably a self-defense mechanism that I don't want to, because on one occasion I had a platoon of 21 people in it. I had 14 killed and 7 wounded, and 21 included me. And I had 14 killed and 7 wounded. And to this day, there's only one person I can remember his name out of that. And at that time, they had been with me for 6 months or so, and I knew every one of them. I knew their families, I knew their children, the whole 9 yards. But I can't remember any of them now. And I've gone back and looked through some of the old stuff I had, and I'll read about somebody that I've written, and I'll go, I can't remember that. And I still do the same thing today. I had a lieutenant call me about 2 months ago. He said he worked for me when we were in Vietnam. I couldn't remember his name. I couldn't remember what he looked like. I don't even remember him being there. And they tell me that's because of the post-traumatic stress. And they tell me that the more stressful situations, well, they define PTSD as a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. And because being infantry, being combat infantry in particular, that you don't see a single one, you'll see 500 little ones. Somebody once told me that you described war as a 20 seconds of mayhem combined with 365 days of absolute terror. And I think that's probably a good definition, because that's what it boils down to. When you get in a fight, you're fine, because everybody reacts. You're trained, you knew what to do, your people know what to do. So when you got into a fight, everything went smooth. You may lose somebody or you may not, but that really doesn't impact on the fact that you know what you're doing. But the other 365 days, you're wandering around trying to figure out how to keep out of trouble. And I don't know if you know anything about the history of the Wolfhounds, but the Wolfhounds was in Korea as the 1st of the 27th, and then after Korea they made 2 different battalions of the 1st of 27th and 2nd 27th. They're the ones that wear the Wolfhound on their crest, on their shoulder. And both Wolfhounds face forward all the time. They have special crests that they have to wear, because normally one of them would go back and one from forward, so they have to make special ones to do that with. But anyway, those folks were very highly trained, very highly motivated, and they really got upset if they went out and didn't find anything. My biggest problem with that crew getting into a fight was getting them out of it, because they didn't want to quit. I mean, you'd see them jump up at a dead run going after somebody if he was running. My attitude is, and my game plan was, if they run, I'm going to call artillery and stay here and watch them. Then we'll go pick up the pieces when the artillery gets there. But they didn't want to do that. They wanted to get them themselves. So my problem with them was, and they may have had some of this, what you were talking about before, but my problem was I wanted to keep them alive, so I'm having to constantly work on them to get that done.
What were you're fighting the North Vietnamese?
Mostly guerrillas.
You don't remember their names, but what were they? Artillery, small arms fire? What happened?
The day I lost the 21, including myself, there was nobody left in my platoon when we got through that day. Was November the 11th, 1966, which November the 11th, you know what that is.
Can you walk me through a little bit of that day, or is it too hard for you?
Well, we went in the night before and secured a an LZ zone so that they could parachute some troopers in there. And they parachuted some 101st people in there. And they came down and got credit for a combat jump. Well, that's fine if they want to do that. I didn't really care, but the area was secure because I know I was there doing it. So, and I was a paratrooper too. I just wasn't in a paratrooper unit. But we went in that night, that day, secured that landing zone. They went in, they organized and set up a defensive position. We stayed there on the airstrip or on the landing strip that day. And then the next morning they told us we were going, or that night we got an order that they were going to send us in first the next morning. And being the most senior lieutenant tune leader in Company A, which is what we were in, I got the dubious honor of going in first. And we were the most experienced. So I didn't have a fight with that because the best chance they had was with us, basically, is what it boiled down to. And we went in and everything, we got up, it was just before daylight. I was out checking everybody because we were going to move out just as soon as it got daylight. I got to checking everybody and I saw, and I noticed something that I had never seen before. I had two of my troops in my platoon that just were sitting staring. They weren't there. And I had never seen any of my people do that before. So I knew from that something's going to happen here, that it's not going to be very pleasant. But I knew that we still had to do it, so we were going to have to go through that. Well, we jumped off and went in. We got maybe 100 yards. And we found out after it was over with that it was an NVA region supply area. And it was very well defended by North Vietnamese regular soldiers. There were no guerrillas there at all. Just these were all real soldiers. And their real soldiers were well trained and very highly motivated. And we got about 100 yards in towards that, and a machine gun opened fire directly in front of me. We all hit the ground, of course, and we were in a light forested area. And when you went to the ground, you couldn't see, maybe 20 yards in front of you. But when you dropped to the ground, you looked, they had cleared a path underneath the trees about 2 feet tall that they could see all through that area. And when we got to looking, the machine gun that was in front, we were maneuvering, trying to get with it, and I split my people off on two sides to try to envelop it. And I'm sitting in the middle because I was directly in front of where it was, and it was shooting at me at that time, as a matter of fact. And I got down behind an ant hill. The ants over there are a little different than our ants. They're mean. And I can remember when it was over with that I was picking them off of me, but during that whole time I didn't even know there was one on me. And I had big whelps on me where they'd bit me. But my attention was diverted quite a bit. But anyway, they started circling, and then the first thing I heard was on my right, another machine gun starts up. And then shortly, another machine gun starts up on the left. And what we had done is they had it set up in a perfect triangle. And we had walked right into the middle of it. They'd let us come right up to the edge of it. The machine guns were no more than 35 yards from us. Now they've got my entire platoon pinned down, and the ones that had not been killed yet, most of them were already wounded. And then when I found out what was going on, then I started trying to move and get my people out of lines of fire, because the only alternative we had at that point was to go backwards. We had to get out of there the best way we could. And I was behind this anthill, and I turned this way, and when I turned to my side to talk to the people that were over on that side, because they were close enough to talk to them, I got shot by that machine gun. And when I got shot, it was kind of a unusual situation. It felt like they had cut down one of the trees that were there, and the tree fell on me. I didn't know I'd been shot, truthfully, because everything just went numb when it did it. And I thought, dang, they've knocked a tree off on me. Didn't realize I'd been shot. Well, my medic was behind me, and he saw me, and he said, "Wait a minute, sir, I'll get you." And I'm going, why is he going to get me? There's nothing wrong with me. So he comes up and he pulls this bandage out, the largest one he had in his case, about that size, and he says, "Let me get this on you." And I said, I'm thinking, what is he doing? He's got people out here wounded. Why is he fooling with me? And I put my hand back and I brought my hand front, and it was completely covered with blood. And then that's the first indication that I'd been shot, and I still had no pain. Well, he bandaged me, gave me a shot of morphine, and then the other platoon, Company B, came in behind us, was able to extract the ones that were still alive And then it was the next day before we got out all of the ones that killed, but then later they did that. But then they pulled us all back in. They took me to the battalion aid station, which was set up basically right where we were. And the battalion surgeon, when I got back there, he looked at me and he said, well, we'll just, you relax, we're gonna take care of you. And with the morphine syringe that they use to kill the pain, they're supposed to put it on you and clip it into your lapel so that they know you've gotten one. Well, the medic didn't put mine on me. So I get back to the battalion and the doctor puts one in me. And he goes, and when he put it on, I'm going, ooh, I like this. I have absolutely no pain. I was totally lucid, but I was having wild hallucinations. He came over to me and he said, now be patient, Dave, we're going to get you out. We'll have you a helicopter in here in just a minute. We'll medevac you out. And I can remember looking him dead in the eye and being dead serious, even though I knew it was impossible. I was dead serious and I told him, well, if you want me to fly out, I don't need an airplane. I can fly out by myself. And when I said it, I'm going, I can't do that, but yeah, I can too. But that's what morphine does for you. And they kept me on morphine for, I don't think it was 2 weeks, I can't remember, but there's a time limit that they have to pull you off of it at 93rd Vac Hospital in Saigon. And so when the doctor came in and talked to me and said, we can't give you any more morphine. We'll give you aspirin, anything else we got, Tylenol, Darvon, anything we got, but we can't give you any more morphine. And I told him, I said, well, I don't need any. Doesn't bother me. I don't feel any pain. He says, you will. Well, about 2 o'clock in the morning, it hit me. And I hollered for the nurse to come in there. She walked up to within 6 feet of me and stopped. I said, come here a minute. She said, nope. I said, no, come here, I want to talk to you. Nope. Come here, I want to talk to you. I need you to help me with something. Nope. I said, well, get the doctor. Well, the doctor comes in, he stopped 6 foot away from me. I said, Doc, come here, I need to talk to you about something. This bandage is not on right or something. He went, nope. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm going to tell you, son, you aren't the first one we've had this happen to, and you ain't going to be the last, but I am not coming over there. And what I had in my mind was, if he came over close enough, I was going to get my hands on him, and if I got my hands on him, he was going to give me some morphine or he was going to be dead. I mean, that's how much change came over you in that short period of time. And that lasted maybe only 2 days at the most. Then after that, we'd laugh about it after that, but he told me, he said, I've been through this many, many times and I know better, because I knew if you got your hands on me, I'd never get away from you again.
So this was November 11th, you were...
November 11th, 1966.
And this is where you lost
21.
14 killed, 7 wounded.
Right.
Did you know at that time that had happened, or was this after?
No, I did not know. Because once they evacuated me and pulled me back, I didn't learn anything more about it until almost 2 days later. What happened is when they evac me, they took me back to Cu-Chi, the 93rd Vac Hospital, to a triage. And there was a bunch of us there at that time. And the doctor came out and looked at me and he said, well, don't worry about him, he's not going to walk anyway. So then my first sergeant, who was back in the rear for the company, came out, and he and I were the only two in the company that at that time smoked Pale Male. And every month you got 10 cartons of Pale Male. So we had cigarettes coming out of our ears because nobody else wanted to smoke them. They were too strong for everybody else, I guess. But anyway, he'd come out, and I'm laying out here, and they're taking people in all the time and just kind of walking around me, And of course, by this time, too, they've stripped off everything on me. I don't have any clothes on at all. They've cut them all off. And, my knife is gone, my gun's gone, my glasses are gone, the whole 9 yards. But anyway, we were sitting there, and he's smoking a cigarette, and he said, you want a cigarette? And I went, yeah, so he'd light me a cigarette. Well, the nurse would come out and say, you can't smoke out here, and she'd take the cigarette away from me and throw it away. Well, as soon as she left, he'd light me another cigarette and hand it to me. We went through 4.5 packs of cigarettes in the next 2.5 hours. But she finally came in, she said, you are not going to smoke anymore. And she said, if you give him one more cigarette, I'm going to have you put in jail. So he got a little nervous about that and quit giving them to me. But then they took me in and operated on me, and then the next morning when I woke up, the doctor told me, he said, you're the luckiest man I've ever met. I said, what do you mean? He said, you should not be walking right now. He said, when you came in, I could see your spine. It was exposed. I could see the ligaments and tendons that are running down into your legs. They were all exposed. He said, you should not be walking. He said, but you don't have any real damage. He said, you've got a little nerve damage, which you'll live with the rest of your life. He said, but You're perfectly fine, truthfully. I said, well, did it make any difference that they left me sitting out there while you were working on other people? He said, no, if it came up again, I'd make the same decision. He was the guy that was in triage doing it. He said, I can't believe it. He said, absolutely floored me. He said, every doctor here has come over to look at you because they can't understand why you can still walk. And then I spent 30 days there at 93rd Evac. And then after 30 days, I went back to my unit, and I was there 3 months before they'd let me go back out in the field again, I think it was. And then by that time, I was about ready to come home anyway.
So, I mean, having never been in combat, I mean, is there camaraderie between the troops? I mean, tell me a little bit about that. And I hear it's like they were fighting to survive. I mean, that's the camaraderie.
Well, the bond between them is unbelievable. I've never been in anything in my life that was like that. You heard Lynn say a while ago that when he got wounded, he didn't want to go. He was going to stay there. That was almost a constant. Very rarely would you see anything other than that. Because if somebody got a little scratch and they could still go and put a Band-Aid on it or put a bandage on it, it didn't really matter. As long as they could do that, they were going to stay there. My platoon sergeant was Sergeant June. The day I got shot in the back, he got shot in his left arm, and it hit him 3 or 4 rounds in his left arm. He lost his whole left arm before it was over with. And when I was on there, on the helipad, waiting on a helicopter coming back, he came out, and they put he and I on the same helicopter. And when he got back, the doctors came in to see us the next morning after they'd operated. And the first question out of his mouth is, when can I get back to my platoon? He said, I've got a platoon out there that nobody's there to supervise them. I need to get back to them. And that's when we found out that there wasn't any platoon there anymore, that we were all, the ones that were there were the ones that were alive, and the ones that weren't there were all killed. That's how we found out about it.
I'm going to ask you a question about Vietnam. Was there drugs used in Vietnam?
Oh, I'm sure there were. You could see it occasionally. I had one occasion, my second tour in Vietnam, where the first sergeant did a spot inspection and checked bunker lockers and that kind of stuff. The foot lockers is basically what we had. Most of them ammo cans, truthfully. And he collected all of the pot and put it started a big fire in the middle of the compound and burned it, and was standing in the smoke. And I looked out, and here's 45 troops around this bonfire, and I'm going, what are they doing? Well, all of them were getting high. That's what they were doing. They lost their pot, but they were still going to get a high out of it. And the first sergeant, he just about panicked on me because he went, I can't do that. I can't be doing that. And I'm going, well, you already have, Top. Ain't nothing you can do about it now. But yes, there was some of that. And I didn't see any hard drugs at all. Heroin, that kind of stuff. I didn't see anything. But there was a lot of pot over there. You could have had pot anytime you wanted to.
Why do you think so many Vietnam veterans came home and they had so many problems? You hear stories. I know of a guy personally needed. I mean, probably a combination of all this. But,
all the above.
But that's sad.
I can tell you,
into society, and they didn't fit anymore.
Well, that's true. I'll tell you what happened to me after I came back from my first tour. I got off of an airplane. I had been fighting in combat 24 hours earlier. I got off of an airplane in jungle fatigues, which is what I still had on when I left, and they had a channel set up from the airplane to the terminal, and they wanted us to go straight in there. Had it blocked off, was lined with MPs. I got down to the choking point in the channel, and a guy spit on me right at that point, and I decked him. Shouldn't have done it probably, but I'd probably do it again if he did the same thing again, quite honestly. So 2 MPs grabbed me, about 6'4" each, I think, about 280 pounds, literally lifted me up and shoved me into the terminal and came in there, and they came in and said, you can't do that and get away with it. I said, he does it, I'll do it again. Of course, I was a lieutenant, but they didn't know that because I didn't have any rank on my uniform. You never wore rank when you were out in the woods because that just gave them a better aiming point if you did that. But then we had to change out of our clothes, put on civilian clothes, and they said, you got to change into them because we don't want them to know you're military. And I looked at him and laughed, and I said, do you really believe anybody out there is not going to know that I'm military? I mean, I had my head shaved off, sides slick, there was no way. Everybody would have identified me without even trying. But right before I got ready to leave the terminal, the lieutenant came up to me, or the sergeant that was in charge of the MPs came up to me, and he kind of looked around to see if anybody was there. And after he did that, he came over and said, "Thank you." I said, "What for?" He said, "For decking that guy. I've been wanting to hit him all day." So,
Well, that's another
but that was my introduction to civilian life. And the other part, the next thing happened to me in the terminal, that was when the miniskirts started. And all these women were walking around with miniskirts on, and I've been isolated, gone. I'm coming home to get married, and I see all these miniskirts and just, I mean, we were bumping into things and everything. You're going to look. I don't care who you are. And I'm 25 years old now, so, you know, it was there, and we literally walked into walls. I mean, you could see them all over the terminal. You'd see somebody walk into something, and you go, "Yep, he just got back." It was something you couldn't even imagine happening while you were over there. And they were all round eyes, which is good. They were Americans. They didn't have slant eyes.
Have you ever been back to Washington, D.C.?
Oh, many times.
Have you seen the Vietnam Wall?
Yes.
Can you tell me the first time you saw it and what you felt and where you went?
Well, the first time I saw it, I probably felt very sad because I couldn't remember any of the names. And I went to the area because I had looked them up in the meantime, and I knew some of the people were there. And I'd look their names up, and I'd go look at them, and I'd look at them on the wall, and I couldn't put a face with it. And these were people that worked for me. They were in my platoon, and I couldn't associate a face with them. So it was very almost demoralizing. I didn't stay there very long. I said, "No, I can't do this. This is not a good time." So I left, and I've been back 4 or 5 times, but I still have to block that part of it out. I have been there for some ceremonies representing the military with the Purple Heart, and I can go through it and do all of that because I can do that without thinking, literally. But I don't. I still to this day, I know what the names are, but I can't. Some of them I know the names, but I can't put a face to them at all. The only 2 that I've ever remembered was one of them was Sergeant June, my platoon sergeant, and the other one was Lieutenant Sylvester, who was my artillery guy. He was the one that directed my artillery fire. It was his job to do that. And that's the only 2 I can remember their names. I had one little black boy that he was my pet, I guess, as close as you ever get to anything like that. But he always got special compensation. He was a little tiny thing. He wasn't even barely 5 foot tall. And he used a M79 grenade launcher is what he fired. That's what he carried. And he had 2 big pouches, one on his front and one on his back. And when he went out, he would take his food and put it into a sock and carry it with him. And then he'd have ammunition. He'd be carrying 400 or 500 rounds of ammunition. And what got this all started was we were going out one day, and I said, "We need to keep a watch behind us because they're going to be trying to follow us out of here." He said, "I can fix that, sir." So he went back to the rear, and he was firing his M79 as an indirect fire weapon. He was pointing it up, dropping rounds behind us to keep them from coming and following us out of there. And there's no doubt in my mind he was effective. So from that point on, every time we got out of something, he was there. That became his job, and he came almost like the platoon pet, truthfully. I mean, and everybody, we would make sure he got food. If we were out and somebody got food, they brought us hot food, which didn't happen very rarely, but we put him up in the front line. And you didn't have to say anything. I mean, you could watch him, they'd reach back and grab him and pull him up in front of the line.
Did they use the Hueys when you were there as medevac?
Yes.
Were you involved to help assist with any of that, or the wounded or the dead or anything like that into the Hueys as they were used?
I've loaded them, yes. It was the same aircraft that I'd flown around on. I mean, there wasn't any changes to it. They just equipped it so that you could put stretchers in it.
Well, can you walk me through just the process of that, of recovery and taking them out of there, out of the Hueys?
Well, I never did it except where we were in a secure area, so it was probably a little different than a lot of them were. But in a secured area, we had some wounded and some killed, and you have your priority list. If you got a wounded, he goes out first. If they're dead, there's nothing else you can do for them, so you take those out last. Right after you get your supplies in, then usually you load them on that aircraft and put them out. So most of the time, the KIAs aren't even dusted off. They actually flew back on a supply helicopter. But the wounded all got on there, and literally you would take them and lift them and put them in the aircraft, because most of them at that point are disoriented, they're hurting, they don't They don't know what's going to happen to them. They don't know how serious they're hurt because there's nobody there to tell them that up to that point. But I've done that. I was in that position several times to do that. But it was, I never did it from an LZ that was hot, I'll put it that way. I dusted off some of my people on the ground where they got into a booby trap or something like that, but there was no hostile fire, so you actually had an aircraft that come in and landed on the ground before you needed to put somebody on it.
What do you mean by dust off?
That's what we call the medics. We called them dust off. They came in and got the wounded out. Just the name.
Was it chaotic at times? I mean, during all this, I mean, was it always controlled, or did it get chaotic? Let me ask you this. Okay.
It's organized panic is what it is, if that makes any sense to you. Again, my job was a platoon leader, so my job is to keep it organized and keep it rational. And so I'm very rarely did I ever get to fight anything. There's only 2 times that I can remember with any clarity that I ever was actually fighting, because most of the time I'm trying to direct these other guys and keep them from getting killed and stopping whoever's on the other end of the bullet that we're firing. So it's hard to understand something like that. I know my dad asked me about the same question when I came back from Vietnam, my first tour. And I'm trying to explain it to him, and he's sitting there going, I don't understand. And I'm going, yep, I know you don't. And then I just said, I quit. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. And he said, okay.
What kind of orders are you giving your men? I mean, you're trying to keep things
Moving, directing fire, what kind of weapon you want to be firing, where do you want it to be firing, where do you want them to be.
Are they coming up to you, talking to you, asking you questions, finding comfort being around you? I mean, as a leader. I mean,
Well, they watch you all the time. As a platoon leader, you're the center of attention. There's no doubt about that part of it. And that's why it's so difficult, because you can't do anything that's not absolutely correct. So you're in a mode that you're going to do it by the book, or you're going to react the way you've been taught to react, and you're going to make sure they do the same thing. So you're a lieutenant platoon leader is in kind of an artificial position, because you're literally not there to fight. You're there to keep those people from getting killed. So it's a little bit different the way I would think about it as opposed to the way a sergeant like Lee would talk about it. His was different. See, he was there to fight. But his lieutenant that was leading that platoon, his job wasn't to fight. His job was to direct them. So I get a different perspective of everything than most people do. Things like, well, I had one occasion we had a sniper fire at us, and I had a machine gunner who dropped down and started shooting out rounds where he suspected the sniper to be, which was not even close, by the way. And I'm hollering at him, telling him, cease fire, and he keeps firing. So I literally go over and take the machine gun away from him to get him to stop firing. And I told him, I said, next time you disobey an order, I'm going to turn it on you. And of course I wouldn't have, but he understood what I was saying when I said that. You over-exaggerate almost everything in combat as a leader. You don't have the luxury of saying, okay, let's talk about that. Because what you say is going to be done immediately, or else somebody's going to get killed, because that's the kind of decisions you make. And I think that's one of the main reasons that I have so much trouble with the names, is because I can remember telling people to do something, and as a result they got killed. So I still have a big blank spot on that, and I don't know if it'll ever come out or not. They tell me that eventually it might, but I've learned to live with it. So I know what it is now. I guess it's the big thing. It's not like it's a great big unknown and I'm going, why am I crazy? I can't remember their names, but I know why I can't remember them now.
Is there a movie out there that's got it right? I mean, about Vietnam. Have you seen a movie before that maybe has?
Probably Saving Private Ryan would have been the closest one I've seen. I've seen Full Metal Jacket and all of those. I got up and walked out of Full Metal Jacket in the middle of it. It was so absurd that it was unbelievable.
You're talking about the beginning of Private Ryan with the land on the beach,
yeah,
and the way they portrayed that. You saw stuff like that?
No, I didn't see stuff like that, but I can see that that would be exactly what would happen. They were very authentic, I thought, with that Saving Private Ryan. I didn't see any of that because we didn't fight that kind of an enemy.
Well, Lewis saw that, so did a lot of.
I'm sure he did.
It's an interesting remark that you referenced that movie. Are you proud that you're a Vietnam veteran?
Sure.
Do people,
absolutely.
Do people thank you for your service?
You know, that's been a really revelation in the last 3 or 4 years. I have been thanked more in the last 3 or 4 years than I did in the 20 years prior to that time. I cannot remember coming back from Vietnam, my first tour and then after my second tour, that anybody said thank you unless it was another soldier. Now, some of the soldiers did. They understood what you were doing, and they would say something to you about it. Most of it was just thank you, appreciate you doing it. But I don't remember a civilian saying anything in 25 years. Never the first word. Nobody said, well, why were you there? You know, everything you got from the civilian population was, how did you like going over there and killing babies? You know, and that's not a good question to ask somebody with PTSD, by the way, because you tend to overreact. One of the problems with PTSD is that you also have a very, very bad anger problem. You don't go from being normal to being mad to being, you know, arrogant to being aggressive. You don't have that normal process. You go from being here to being totally hostile in one swoop. So it's a little difficult. I had to learn how to control that. That's what I had my biggest problem with when I got out. And I had a couple of occasions where I didn't control it very well too.
Can you tell me what Agent Orange is and what it does?
It's a defoliant. It was designed to kill the trees, leaves, grass, anything that was out there. And it was very prevalent. I've walked through many fields that were just laid out, and you knew that that was Agent Orange that had done it. It was used extensively. We had, well, it was everywhere. There was no way to avoid it.
You say defoliage, was it used to kill the enemy?
No, kill the foliage, the green. Anything that grew from the ground, it would kill it. And believe me, it would kill it. It was unbelievable how well it worked.
So now a lot of veterans probably suffer from the effects of that.
Yeah, they have identified some illnesses that are a direct reflection of it. Like in my case, they identified me as a diabetic, and they told me that under normal circumstances, I probably would have never been a diabetic. But because of that, I am a diabetic now.
Being a Vietnam veteran and an American citizen, what does freedom mean to you?
It's probably the most important thing in my life. Somebody asked me one time to define myself, and my first response is that I am an American. And that one sentence, which most folks wouldn't understand what I'm saying, but that encompasses my flag and my God. And nobody is going to mess with either one of those. So my reaction probably is that don't try me, you won't like the results. I am very patriotic. Always have been. And it was really strange. My dad was never in the military. They wouldn't let him go because he was an electrician in a coal mine, and he enlisted in the Army, Navy, Marines, and Air Force. And they pulled him off the train every time and sent him back home and said, you can't go. But his brother, Carl Lewis Price, was killed on Iwo Jima. And that's, they've got a picture of him when he was 19 years old and a picture of me when I was 19 years old, and it looks like the same person, just had on different clothes. They said I looked exactly like he did. So Dad used to say, well, I know what he'd have looked like now if he'd have lived, even when I was, gone on up there until Dad died in '92.
Tell me about the price of freedom. You saw men wounded, killed. Tell me about the price of freedom.
Well, there's no price that you wouldn't pay, or I wouldn't pay. If I knew that I was going to lose my life doing something and I knew that was needed in order to keep this country free, I'd have done it in a heartbeat. I would do it today, even in a heartbeat. That's not a sacrifice. Everybody said, well, you would sacrifice. That's not a sacrifice. To me, that's my responsibility to do that, and I could never, under any circumstances, shirk that responsibility.
You mentioned the flag. What does the American flag mean and represent to you?
Well, there's a bumper sticker out someplace. He says, if you want to burn an American flag, you better bring an army with you. Because if you try to burn an American flag around me, I'm going to kill somebody. And I would, literally. To me, that is America. The American flag represents everything as a symbol that I think America is. And if you desecrate that flag, you're going to have me in deep trouble. I can tell you right now, because I know, I don't think I could control myself if you did that. It's like, well, the same thing happened when I came back from my first tour. They were burning draft cards, and I kind of laughed. I thought that was a joke, you know. So they burn their draft card. Who cares? They're the only ones that need the card. They've already got all the information that they need on you and there. And I kind of laughed at that. But then I came back, and the first tour I came back to Kentucky. I came to West Virginia first, where Mom and Dad were. Then I flew back to Kentucky. And I got off the airplane in Louisville, and there was a guy wearing a shirt or a jacket, I don't remember which it was, that was made out of an American flag. And I went over and took it off of him. And he was going, you know, his eyes are glazed over. And what are you doing? I said, that's an American flag. It's not a piece of clothing. You don't wear it. And now you can see them every place now. If I tried to take them all off now, I'd need an army to keep up with them, or a truck to put them in anyway. But the flag is America. They are synonymous as far as I'm concerned. I don't know how World War II think. I'd say it's probably very similar.
Are there sights and sounds that bring back Vietnam to you today?
Yeah, smells more than anything else. I've got a little vial of vanilla that I carry with me. And we learned that it's a trick. If you smell something that reminds you of that, in mold, mildew, bird droppings, those kind of smells would trigger it. And whenever I get one of them, I pull that little vial out with vanilla on it, and I take a sniff of it. And the reason for that is there was no vanilla over there anywhere. And if I take a smell of vanilla, then I immediately think of home, because that's where you would have had the vanilla. So I can use that as an escape to get away from it immediately. And then once you make the escape, then you're going, oh, okay, I know what that is, and you keep going. But it's just it's like a release mechanism, I guess. I'm not real sure.
What about helicopters in the sky? Do you jump?
Yeah.
Probably not anymore. But
Well, no, I do. I still do.
Yeah.
If a shot goes off, I guarantee you've got my attention. I had an occasion last year. I was on top of my roof, painting some metal on the gutters and that kind of stuff on top of it. And I was standing on the side of it with my feet spread apart with one foot up higher than the other. And a shot went off. And I went down to escape it and almost came off the roof. I ended up hanging on to a breathing pipe, to keep me from falling off the roof. And I wouldn't tell him, no, and everybody kept saying, well, what happened? I said, well, I just put my foot in the wrong place, which is true. I did put my foot in the wrong place, but that wasn't why the whole thing happened. It's because a gun was fired. I still do it today. If somebody fired a gun out there, I guarantee you'd have problems, because I'll be under something or on the floor anyway to try to get as low as I can to it. So yeah, it still happens today. I'm a little more guarded, and I'm around some folks. I feel comfortable if I feel safe with them. Like if I'm at a Purple Heart meeting and it happens, I just go, oh, another shot went off, because I know the people there all have felt the same thing I did. But if I'm with civilians, then I may panic on them at that point.
We're just about done, but what do you want people to remember about Vietnam?
That we were there for the right reasons, and that they wouldn't let us do what we needed to do to make those reasons come true. I think it was a political war. It was fought for fame and money. Big business ran the war. I don't know if anybody's thought about that part of it or not, but it was all as a direct result of the billions and billions and billions that could be made off of having a war. This country has a habit. If we get into a recession, they'll start a war someplace. Picks the economy back up again. But anytime you have national leaders, government leaders, who have not had an exposure to the military, who have avoided the military, you're going to have the same problem, because they don't think about what they're doing. When we used to have generals becoming president of the United States, you didn't see these kind of things, because it didn't happen, because they already knew what was going on. But we got so many now that I think there's only like 37% of the senators today have had any combat experience whatsoever. And I think a good example of that was McCain got into a shouting contest with, what was his name? He was from Hawaii. I can't remember what his name was, but anyway, the senator asked McCain, says, have you ever had a real job? Now, McCain was a 30-year military man, spent 5 years in Hanoi, in Hanoi Hilton. So, and I was absolutely, when I read his response, I absolutely laughed at it, because he told him, he said, here's what I've done. Basically, he went through it. He said, now, Senator, have you ever had a real job? And it shut him up completely. I mean, just stopped it altogether. McCain's a pretty sharp dude, he really is. I'm a big fan of his. I don't like all his ideas, but that's beside the point. I don't think anybody out there, I would like all their ideas.
I want to ask you to do one more thing for me.
Sure.
Can you give me a salute into the camera when I tell you to?
Sure.
Okay. From where you're seated, right there. Okay. Okay, sir, right into the camera. Thank you.